Hello everybody and welcome back to another Marvel Crisis Protocol roster building video. And today we are doing a little bit of a more kind of loose theme than some of the ones I've done in the past. Recently, I'd say probably give or take less than a week actually when this video goes up, I was creating the Flash in Marvel Crisis Protocol for a video on the channel, and it kind of has me in a mood for some faster characters here. So today we're going to be building a list that is all about models that have the need for speed, and yeah, we're gonna kind of go ahead and get into that. And I think one of the first places to start is kind of figuring out what affiliation we're going to be doing this with. And personally, I think one of the best affiliations for this, and this is somewhat biased because it's one of my favorite affiliations in the game, is actually going to be Avengers, with specifically Captain Sam leading the charge here. And why Sam? Well, I mean, he's a long mover, so of course he's fast, but I think being a long mover isn't quite enough to make this a thing. What I like specifically about Sam for speed is, I mean, first of all, he's giving us those extra advances with his leadership here, which is going to feel really, really nice as well. But then in addition with that, with his long move and a charge, he can technically do a long move into a Red Wing Assault, which gives him a place. And that gives him that little bit over just being a long mover, because, I mean, there's way too many of those in the game, so if we wanted to make a list that was all long movers, there'd be so many places to start. So we're going to start it with Sam. He's probably going to be one of the slower characters on this list, honestly, but I think he's a kind of good place to start with this list. From there, we're going to look at some of the other Avengers that are viable options here. And there's a few good choices we can kind of look at here. Some of the first ones that jump out to me, partially just because they're at the top of the list here, are Black Panther, who's going to be a long mover as well, and he has that pounce again, so being able to really take advantage of extra distance, just being able to cross absurd amounts of space. And then Ant-Man, for those who aren't aware, can do some stupid shenanigans as early as turn 1, where basically he can change size to go to his tiny mode, and then he can place himself range 3. So the idea is you kind of get that little place range 1. Oh, I totally didn't actually change his size there. I just flipped his card. You go to his tiny mode, he can place range 3. So what you do is you can move your medium while you're still on your larger size, transform, get that range 1 place, and then get that range 3 place for 0 power, and then be making that 6 dice range 1 attack as early as round 1. Or, you know, if you're just going for distance, you can do that as well. Obviously, going for distance isn't quite as valuable with him because he can't, like, run away with extracts and things like that. But still, I think he's definitely a worthy inclusion if we're going the Avengers route anyways here. So I think Ant-Man's going to take the first on the list, and probably Black Panther as well. The one hesitation I do have on the original Black Panther is that King T'Challa does exist as well. He is also an Avengers character, and he's got a long move as well, and he has this bound ability where he places himself within range 2. And of course that makes his attack better and things like that too. So very, very similar as far as speed goes. In this case, the long move is slightly, the short throw, I believe, is slightly further than the range 2. So we're going to give it to this Black Panther because he is technically faster, and also because I actually own a painted one of this Black Panther, so if I wanted to run this list in the future, I'd be able to do that. Next, we're going to take a look at maybe including Widow here just as a 2-threat option. Just being a long mover, I mean, we're not going to get much better than that as a 2-threat. I'd be curious to see what the difference is with something like Toad, who has the hop. He can double medium move and hop. That, I think, is still slower than a double long move, but it's pretty comparable. So there's an argument to go either way with that one. But I think if we're going to include a 2-threat, which is definitely going to help us, allow us to splash a few more models in here, Widow is probably the way to go because of that Avengers affiliation there. Next up, you cannot build a list that is all about speed without considering Mr. Quicksilver here. Triple long move, I don't think I need to say more than that, and he's an Avenger, so really, really easy to slot him into the list. And look at this, we're already at 5 out of 10 characters here, and I mean, other than maybe Widow, these are all characters I would have immediately thought of for inclusion in a list like this. So Yeah, this is I'm definitely sticking with my opinion on going with Avengers here. I think that was probably the right call. As far as other characters here, another one worth considering would be Wasp. As far as just being able to move far distances, you get that range 1 teleport from your transform into tiny mode, and then when she's in tiny mode, she has that long move. So Wasp is a strong consideration there, basically the ability to double long move and place at range 1. Similarly, we have Spider-Woman, who, oops, I didn't mean to actually just add her. Spider-Woman has the long move as well, and that I don't fly, I glide superpower there, placing range 2. So between the two, Spider-Woman is technically a little bit faster. So we're going to keep both of them in mind as we go through, but I think for now, we have enough Avengers in here that we can kind of start looking at the rest of the game and see what other options are available to us. All right, so right out the gate, when turning off the filter for Avengers, we see tons of great options here. And the first one I want to look at is either Amazing Spider-Man or Angela, both being some of the only natural safe grab models left in the game. For that matter, Namor makes his way into this conversation as well. But between the three of them, I am going to lean towards Amazing Spider-Man, and the reason for that is just that he also has that web swing there, allowing him to get that extra range 3 place on top of the double long move he could do in a turn. He's up there as potentially one of the fastest models in the game. So yeah, he definitely earns a slot here. And I think he's just going to slightly edge out both Angela and Namor for that slot. But either of them would be a very worthy inclusion in a list such as this. Another model definitely worth considering, although I'm not sure if he's going to quite make the cut, is going to be Baron Zemo here, for a very similar idea to what Sam in the list is doing here. Being a long mover, he can charge into his spender here, that's Steel Rush, and get a medium advance off of his attack as well, allowing him to effectively long move twice and medium move on an ideal activation. So yeah, that's definitely really, really good, but not 100% sure if that's the fastest we can do, because I know there's at least a couple more that I want to consider. It would be kind of hard to do a Need for Speed style list without considering Ghost Rider. Ghost Rider is kind of one of the original Speedy models. He is only a medium mover, but he is on a large base, so it kind of makes up for a lot of that. But he also has this ability to advance himself long for 3 power, and yeah, I think he's just kind of an immediate include in here. He's one of the fastest characters in the game, or at least he was for a long time. There's definitely been some speedy characters introduced since, but yeah, he makes a lot of sense in a list like this, so we're going to go ahead and throw him in here as well. I did consider Cosmic Ghost Rider. Cosmic Ghost Rider is capable of moving incredibly fast because he has the ability to spend up to 5 to place himself up to X. And then he's also a large base medium mover, so he moves pretty quickly. The problem with him for that is that it's going to be relatively inconsistent whether or not he has the power to be going that fast. And in addition to that, I'm trying to kind of build this as a more kind of objective, runaway focused team, and Cosmic Ghost Rider kind of plays to the opposite style of that. So yeah, I think he's not going to make too much sense for the rest of the list, but he would be a worthy inclusion if we were just kind of saying, here's the 10 fastest models in the game, but I'm going to try and make this slightly more playable than that. The next character that I felt like just had to be included on this list is going to be Ulik, and I'm realizing at this point we're actually keep piling up the 5 threats here, which might be a bit of a problem, so something to consider going forward after this pick. But Ulik just makes a lot of sense here. I mean, Crushing Leap being something he's allowed to do twice, we know that's better than a long move, the small advance, and then a range 2 place on a medium base is faster than a long move, so he can do that twice in a turn if he wants to. And then he also has his card, which usually for competitive play, I personally don't bring his range like 5 place card, but makes a lot of sense for a list like this, so we will be choosing to include that as well when we get to that part of the list building here. So yeah, I think Ulik makes sense. With his card, he's easily one of the fastest models in the game, so he's gonna take a slot on that spot there. All right, so with only 2 slots left, I'm going to go over some of the options that I've been kind of considering, and also just looking at what we have here, because we're looking at 3 3 threats, a 2, a 4, and 3 5s. So I think definitely wanting to look at those 3 and 4 threat ranges, specifically at least one more 4 is worth doing. And as far as what our options include, one of the ones that I haven't mentioned yet is Rhino. Rhino is capable of being very, very fast with his place off of his attacks. Now that is usually, you're placing beside an enemy, so you can't really use that to run away as much, but you do have the ability of also using that Stampede to push yourself medium. So Rhino can be deceptively very, very fast if he wants to be, and I think that makes him a worthy consideration here. We've also already mentioned Spider-Woman and Zemo at this point in time as some other models to consider. We also have models like Nightcrawler here, who can place himself up to range 3. He's only a medium mover, but then he can also place himself off of his range 3 attacks as well, placing range 2 off of the people he attacks, so potentially getting a lot of extra distance out of that. So he would be a worthy consideration as well here. There were a few others I was kind of looking at. Lockjaw could be kind of funny because while he himself isn't fast, he can make your other models really, really zooming. So that would be potentially something you could kind of do. Juggernaut, obviously, he kind of plays similarly to Rhino, and with Nothing Stops the Juggernaut being something that he can use more than once per turn would be really, really solid for a list like this where you're just trying to get as much distance as possible. Of course, another problem that he's going to have here is being that 5 threat slot where we've already got 3 people taking up that slot, so something that unfortunately is probably going to cut him out. Both Gwenom and Ghost Spider are also considerations. They're just long movers that have some kind of tricks to allow them to do other things while they're running around, which I think is worth kind of keeping in mind that, again, we want to make this list playable, not just speed for the sake of speed, so that's something to consider as well. Doctor Strange, Sorcerer Supreme, has the Scalpel of Strange, that range 3 place. He can use that on himself or his allies. Definitely helps him zip around the board faster than you would expect him to. So obviously a really strong consideration there as well. But I think looking at what we've already selected, I think it's going to come down to probably some of these 3 and 4 threat options that we've been looking at. I'm actually just seeing Black Cat here and realizing that Black Cat moves the same amount that Spider-Woman does. But I think because I'm really heavily leaning towards Zemo here, I do really like him for a list like this. We definitely want our last pick to be a second 4 threat because we're very much hurting in that area. So I think Spider-Woman or Rhino is what it's going to come down to. And between the two, I think I'm going to give it to Rhino. I think you can kind of go either way here. They're both providing a steal as well, which is just good for making this a very playable list. And yeah, I think I think that's both of them would be a solid pick here. Spider-Woman definitely lets you stay affiliated a little bit more easily, especially with some of these splash choices. But I think because most of our splashes here are 5s, it's not going to be too hard to stay affiliated with 1 or 2 splashes in the list because we do have stuff like Widow to help even that out as well, and only a 3 threat leader, of course, helps with that too. So we're going to go with Rhino. That might be the right choice, that might not. Definitely something that is kind of up for consideration there. But yeah, I think I'm pretty happy with that. There's tons of different ways you could do a list like this, so there isn't really a way to go wrong if you guys are building something similar. All of the things that we've discussed are perfectly viable options, and if there's any that I'm missing, where you're screaming at me right now that this character is super fast and I'm just totally blanking on it, let me know down in the comments because I'm sure there's at least 1 or 2 where I've just completely skipped over them and wasn't paying attention. Alrighty, so it's time to look at tactics cards now, and we have a fair bit of options here for tactics cards, but I mean, let's start out with the easy ones. So we're going to start out with the affiliated cards, and I mean, in a list about mobility, I think Avengers Assemble probably makes the cut. Just gonna throw that out there. So we're gonna go ahead and throw Avengers Assemble in here because yeah, I think it's pretty solid. Then we're going to take a look at some of our restricted options here. We are definitely going to want restricted options, and I think Brace is just really good. I have a hard time building a list without Brace these days, so I think we're going to include Brace here. As for our next card, I think you can't go wrong with something like Sacrifice or Patch Up from a kind of competitive standpoint, but I think in the spirit of moving around constantly, Fallback just kind of makes sense here. That to me, maybe not the best pick competitively, but it's going to make the most sense in my opinion with the kind of theme of the list. If I was bringing this to a tournament, I probably swap that out for Patch Up or Sacrifice, but just for local play or, for the sake of this video, I think fallback's just going to be more fun, so we're going to go ahead and throw that in there as well. As far as character cards go, the first things we want to do are make sure we're taking all of our speed-related cards. So we're going to start out with I Am a Baron here, because giving Zemo the ability to charge earlier in the game is going to help him go fast and get work done. So definitely something we want to be able to do. From there, there's another obvious one that we mentioned earlier, Rock Control, just being, place 5 turns out is pretty far movement. So we're going to include both of those. And then actually vertical assistance, another benefit to having Natasha in this list here, allowing us to give an immediate advance of small to to another character within 3 of her is going to, again, just kind of push that speed a little bit more. So that's going to be our first ones there that are kind of speed focused. From there, in terms of cards that I think are just good to have, if we're bringing Ghost Rider and we have a 2 threat in the list, we should really be bringing Deal with the Devil. So we're going to include that. And then we talked about objective steals and how those are just kind of good. So I think Can I Borrow That and wherever it is, This Is a Robbery are probably also worth considering. So yeah, now we are running into an issue here where we have three, kind of generic cards and a bunch of character cards followed by only 1 slot remaining. So we have to be somewhat careful with what we're doing here. Now, thankfully, all of these cards are for different characters. So as long as our last card is a generic card, I think it's going to be pretty rare, because what is this? This is 6 cards. I think it's going to be pretty rare we don't bring any of those 6 models. So we're just going to have to kind of keep that in mind during squad building with this list. In theory, you could probably cut out something like Can I Borrow That, because you've already got This As a Robbery, but I think that's just going to encourage you to run Quicksilver less, which I don't really want to do. So we're going to leave it as it is for the character cards here, and we're just going to be somewhat mindful with our last card, making sure it's a generic here. So for this last card, we have tons of options. Warpath, if we want to really push into that, here's another short advance ability. Definitely a thematic pick we could do. We could do something like Survival, just generically a good card now. Recalibration Matrix, same deal, just a solid card. I think those would kind of be the main ones I would be looking at here, and between all of them, I am going to go with the thematic pick here and pick Warpath. We could also, in theory, look at some of the other Avengers or Avengers adjacent cards. Specifically, I'd be looking at Second Wind and Reserve Members. Reserve Members, though, is kind of a character card, because I'm pretty sure the only character we could play it on is Zemo, so, I mean, that kind of just means we're doubling up on Zemo cards, so that would be a thing. And Second Wind is a fine card in the right situation, but I don't think we're really playing the type of list that's going to get all that much mileage out of it, so I think we're pretty okay to just go with Warpath here. Once again, if I was building this for a tournament or something like that, I would probably lean more towards something like Recalibration Matrix or Survival. Those are probably the better cards for a list like this, but I'm gonna stick with it because movement and things is what we're doing. Lastly, we are on to crises, and we really want to be able to pick something that we can abuse our mobility on here. So we're going to be picking scenarios that I don't usually pick for lists, because I usually play a lot more kind of attrition-y focused lists. So it's going to be a weird one for me, because I'm actually starting out with one of my least favorite scenarios in the game, which is going to be Skrulls. I mean, we've got a safe grab for either of the side Skrulls in Amazing Spider-Man, and pretty much everyone else on our team can safely grab our back Skrull. We have no short of mobility options in this list and ways to kind of get around that push, so I think we can get a lot of value out of something like Skrulls in a list like this. The next one we're going to pick for very, very similar reasons is going to be Spider Infected here. Again, it's going to be a relatively high scoring scenario that's going to be pushing models around, but we're going to be able to kind of make up for that more than most opponents would be. So it just makes a lot of sense to kind of go with this, right? So yeah, we're gonna take that one next here. All right, so our last extract might seem a little kind of opposite of what we're trying to do here, because I'm actually strongly leaning towards senators for this one, and I'll explain why in a moment. I think the other considerations would be struggle for the cube, just because, again, we have access to a safe grab, and we'll be able to use that power to get all our mobility stuff online pretty frequently, so that's certainly not bad for us, but I'm leaning more towards senators here, because it does specify a character holding a senator can only make 1 move action per turn, However, most of our mobility on a lot of these characters isn't necessarily just from the fact that they could double move, but also all of these other things they can do to to move themselves around the board. Then you have characters like Ulik, where it's not even a traditional charge where it's a move action followed by an attack action. It's a short advance followed by a place 2 followed by an attack. None of those would use up our one move action per turn, so he could still double charge. Zemo could still charge and use a spender to advance away. Spider-Man can still web swing. All of these different things that we have are going to get around the restrictions that Senators have, and we'll really be able to abuse that extra movement if we need to run away with them, or just trying to stay, just out of our opposing models' threat ranges, kind of play those hit and run style strategies. So we can go with something like Senators there for our last extract. Going into secures, I think we got to be somewhat mindful of what we're doing here. I mean, the kind of obvious choice would just be pick a bunch of D maps. We can rotate them pretty effectively, and that's probably not a bad choice either. Personally, as someone who likes to play a little bit more fighty, I prefer kind of things where I'd be able to hit and run, move towards them, punch them, and then use our mobility to come back, that sort of thing. So personally, I'm leaning more towards stuff like B maps or F maps. I also just personally find them more fun to play with, but I think you wouldn't be wrong at all for just kind of being like, hey, I'm going to pick the 3D maps and move on from there, because realistically speaking, that's probably the right choice. We are going to go ahead and pick one of the D maps though, and that is going to be Portals Overrun with Spider People. And the reason why we're picking this is the same as some of our extracts there, just being that it's going to be pushing characters around, and we can kind of take advantage of that. So yeah, that's going to make a lot of sense there. From there, Cosmic Invasion is definitely a strong consideration. Again, the exact same reasoning. It just works really, really well for a list like this. So yeah, we might end up doing it 2 of the D shapes. The other ones I'm kind of strongly considering here are stuff like Infinity Formula could be really, really good, or Scoundrels, where we can benefit from the cover, and of course, Sam can ignore it with his shield throw. Both really, really good things we can kind of abuse. We'd probably be pretty solid on pay to flips, so Mutant Madman, Deadly Meteors, also very, very worthwhile considerations. Even something like Sword could potentially be really, really good for us. We could easily hit 2, if not, easily hit 2 or 3, if not 4. Like all 4 sword points in a single turn with the right character. So definitely worthwhile considerations for those as well. I think personally, I actually really like the idea of playing this on Sword. It's probably going to bite me if I go up against an attrition team, but I just love Sword and want to play it more often, so I'm going to pick that. And then, yeah, from there, it's probably between Scoundrels and Cosmic Invasion. And you know what? Yeah, I think Cosmic Invasion is probably the right choice here. Being able to get around that, we're running Rhino, who can also benefit a lot from being pushed first turn. So we kind of have that play as well. I think this one just makes a lot of sense. So we're going to go ahead and pick that. So we're not quite doing all 3 of the D maps. And again, it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to have switched this for either Riots, Infinity, or Scoundrels. Honestly, this is kind of a list where I feel like I could play on half the secures in the game very, very comfortably. But is what it is. We're going to go with these 3 and maybe regret those choices, but we'll see. And here we have the final list all done. Lots of hard choices in this list, honestly. Going into it, I kind of expected it to be one that I was going to be able to do really, really quickly, but there was definitely some big decision points here, and I'm not really confident that I made the right ones. Obviously, I've explained my reasoning on most of the ones where I was kind of like, I don't know about this one. So very curious to hear what kind of versions of this you guys might throw together down in the comments below. So definitely let me know. But for our version of the list here, we have Sam leading the charge as an Avengers list. Our Avengers characters include Ant-Man, Black Panther, Black Widow, and Quicksilver. And then we get into some splashes, some of the fastest models in the game here, with Amazing Spider-Man, Ghost Rider, Ulik, Baron Zemo, and Rhino. So yeah, it does actually seem like a really solid list of 10 characters. Like, I could see this in a tournament list and not bat an eye. I think the most surprising things would probably be Quicksilver and Ghost Rider, and even they're not like particularly shocking. You just don't see as much of them. So yeah, really, really neat to kind of see how that came together there. Going into tactics cards, we have Avengers Assemble for our only affiliated card. We got Brace for Impact and Fallback, taking our restricted slots. And then going into character cards, we got a whopping 6 of them, with I Am a Baron, Rock Control, Vertical Assistance, Deal with the Devil, Can I Borrow That, and This Is Our Robbery. And then lastly, we have Warpath because Warpath is mobility based and we are doing a mobility team. So yeah, kind of makes sense there. Lastly, we've got our crises, where our extracts include Skrulls, Spider Infected, and Senators, and our secures are Portals overrun with Spider People, Sword Base, and Cosmic Invasion. Black Order descends on Earth. This is definitely a weird one for me. I usually don't do as objective focused teams, and it's kind of funny sitting back and looking at this being like, this might be one of the most competitive lists I've done on the series, and I started it with haha, models funny, go zoom. And yeah, I mean, I guess that's kind of how it works out. Turns out that is actually quite a viable strategy right now. So is it very much a thing? I might actually try playing around with this list because this seems like it could be a fun list to play. So yeah, it might be something I try on locals or maybe try to work into a battle report in the near future. But as far as this video is concerned, that is going to wrap it up for this roster. So definitely let me know what you guys think down below. Any suggestions on how you might have done this differently or what characters you might have included that I chose not to. Very, very curious to hear what you guys think. But yeah, I think that's going to do it for this video. So I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please do drop a like down below. Subscribe if you're new to the channel, helps us out a bunch, lets us know you guys are enjoying the stuff we are throwing out here. And we also recently opened memberships. So if you're interested in supporting the channel that little bit extra, definitely very, very much appreciated. But that's going to do it for me. So until next time, have a great day, everybody. Peace.